Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to Project Sparkles. Today, we're going to be talking about how we're using Compose to change and improve Android Studio.
You want to introduce yourself?
No, I'm Seb. I feel like my name has been said enough times.
I'm Chris. So what is Project Sparkles? It's a very unofficial code name for a project which is bringing high-quality UI gradually back into Android Studio using Compose. But why are we doing it? That's probably the most important thing. So really, at the core of it, it's about developer UX. I am a UX designer, so this is all I think about. But really, we believe that if you have a better developer user experience, that in turn will give you a better user experience for your apps. And for us in Android Studio, because we build the tools, we think if we can deliver a better tool, that allows you all to build better apps, inherently helping Android and everyone being happy. But what does that mean? It means that with better developer UX, we can actually ship things faster. We can actually iterate. We can try more ideas, not just do something once and call it good. And more iteration, more ideas, just more exploration. We think that can make the IDE more usable. We don't have to settle for a working solution or a minimum solution. We can also do things that are much more crafted. We are in 2024. Studio doesn't have a lot of animations. You're going to see a lot of them, just fair warning. But really, it's about just making the IDE shine. And for that, it really sparks joy for all developers. So for our developers building Studio, it makes them feel better about their day-to-day grind of building UI and building all these features. But for all of you, as you're building your apps, maybe you'll be inspired by the things you see in Android Studio. But why are we only doing this now?
Well, let's just say that developing an IDE is not an easy task, especially when you're building on a platform that is 20-odd years old. So what is the reason we've been holding on so far? Well, there are some technical difficulties that come with the territory. Let's put it that way. When you build user interfaces in the IDE, in the IntelliJ platform, you're using Swing, which, if you're old enough, might remember is the almost OG Java UI framework. Now, that has been polished and perfected over the years, and the IntelliJ platform is probably the best example of Swing UI out there. But it's not very easy to learn. There's very little out there that you can use to learn. There is a lot of complexity. Swing is very opinionated in being very old-fashioned about the way it does things. And so that is making it difficult for our engineers to ship new features and be as good as we would like them to be. So if we take a step back, about a year ago, we were here on this stage probably, and we did a talk when we were actually starting to go through this. We introduced Joule. Joule is the Compose for Desktop UI theme and set of components that we're building that match the user interface that Swing implements in the IntelliJ platform. Now, if Chris' slides felt familiar from before, we actually added last year. And the reason is that we feel it's extremely important for us to be the best we can so that you folks can be the best possible. Now, we are using Compose for Desktop, which I should say is JetBrains, not us. But we're using that, and we're working with them to develop the Joule library as well. So there's synergy. Sorry, my clicker the screen is not updating. So I could go on and on about how great corporate synergy is. This is, after all, a keynote. But I'm not going to do that. Instead, we're going to be talking about, in practice, what this means and what we're doing. So you might imagine, or maybe you even know, that the Android Studio team at Google and the IntelliJ platform team at JetBrains are working very closely together because, after all, Android Studio is built on the IntelliJ platform, and we're building features together and improving the platform for everyone. But also, the Compose team at Google is working with the Compose team at JetBrains, again, because it's in the interest of everyone to have the best possible outcome. But what we are doing here is kind of like the next step, where we're taking these two chunks of collaboration and putting them together so that there is, across teams and across companies, we're all building together to improve things, well, eventually for you folks. And at the center of all of this is Joule. Now, if you want to learn more about Joule, this month's ADB podcast, I was the guest. I explained a lot more about Joule, why it exists, what it does and what it doesn't do. That's the name of the episode in case you're curious. I'll just let you find things on your podcast feed.
Oh,
Still me. Sorry, nervous. So the first feature we have shipped with Compose is task-based profilers. This was launched in Koala 2. Koala 2 was announced at Google I/O. Now, we didn't really mention at the time that this was built using Compose, because for us, this was more of a testing ground. We wanted to make sure that Compose works for us, that it is something we can scale, that we can build on it, and that it also achieves the other goals, which are making it easier for our engineers and making it faster as well. Now, obviously, that is not the whole reason why we ship features, because it's also like this work was done primarily because people were finding profilers difficult to understand. And it's a very technical task. So we got a lot of that feedback from folks like you, and we decided, okay, maybe we can take the opportunity of improving profilers by also trying out this new technology and seeing if that works out. And I'm happy to say we actually did not get any Compose bugs reported. We got some polish bugs, but nothing about Compose itself, which is great. Success. Now, we also have a second feature that is shipping today in Ladybug 2 Canaries, which is the new add-device dialog. Now, this flow has been there for a long time, since emulator have been a thing. And the reason we have this work is that, again, the core motivation is that design was starting to feel a bit outdated. And we designed that a long time ago. It was designed and developed back when Android was only phones. We didn't have as many form factors. We didn't have as many variants and complexity to deal with. And so what we kind of found ourselves hearing from folks is, again, creating a new device is difficult. So, okay, again, we can do a new feature, like we can rebuild this feature, but we can use Compose to do it. And the main goal of this feature is to optimize for the most common cases that folks run through. So ideally now, I don't know if you've used this dialog in Ladybug, but the idea is that if you're going through the most common cases, it should be much faster and easier to create a virtual device than it was before. Now, this is our first Compose-based dialog, to which most of you probably will say, okay. There is actually a lot of complexity behind this. You wouldn't imagine, but as everything, when you start looking into the details, there are a lot of things that could go wrong. Luckily, none did. We are actually very happy with the result. But our previous experiment was in a tool window, a panel, which, again, you wouldn't imagine, but it does make a difference in the actual implementation. And the other thing that we created for this feature is a table layout. Now, if you've been following Compose from the very, very early days, you might remember that it used to have a table layout, but then that was removed before 1.0. And, well, the team that built this actually needed a table. So what they did is they built a basic table component where they can now show that data. So what I want to say here is we are kind of building this as we go. We're implementing the components as we need them. And this is very exciting, but also very scary. But at the end of the day, we are all here talking about UI. But have you heard about AI? Actually, no. I'm going to keep to UI. We're just going to be talking about UI for AI because, of course, Gemini. Now, if you've used Android Studio in the past 2 years, you will have noticed that there is a very nice integration with Gemini in Android Studio. What we are building now using Compose is we are redoing the entire UI of the chat. That is a lot of work, but it's also very exciting. That is going to be launching in the next major studio version, which is codenamed Meerkat. It should be launching soon. No dates. But our goal for now is to get feature parity with Swing. So we have a fairly complex UI in the chat in this current Swing implementation. And we don't really want to throw too many things in at first. We just want to validate that we can match what exists. And no, who am I kidding? This is boring. No. We're actually going to take advantage of Compose. So there is a lot of complexity in the Gemini chat UI because there is a lot of coordination between the data that comes from the model, the data that comes from the IDE, the state of the IDE, the state of the UI. All of that stuff adds up. And it's getting really, really difficult to manage this complexity in the Swing implementation because, unfortunately, it's really hard to keep state consistent across the UI and the data layer. And we're also taking the opportunity to increase the polish because, I mean, it's Compose. We can do better, right? That's kind of the whole point. Now, the next time that you log into Gemini and Android Studio in the Meerkat, maybe you'll see that now when you log in, the authorized label actually fades in with a small animation. That's easy. Probably most of you have used Compose here and know that that's like one line of code. We can do better. So another thing that we're playing with is, again, a small aspect of the UI. It's not fundamentally changing the user experience, but it is conveying the level of polish and attention that we're putting into this. So now, as you type your query in the query box in the Compose UI, you will see that it actually changes size by animating the height of the text box. Again, this is not going to change your life, but it is polished, it is nice, and it conveys the quality that we want to represent. More than that, we're also working on animating the way the messages come in as they stream from the model. Now, this is still a partial implementation. It's only like running from the main branch. It's not fully done yet, but we're getting there. The idea is that eventually we'll get to a point where the message streams in kind of the same way the UI on the web does, so very nice, smooth animation and everything. And we're also working on refining a feature that has not launched yet, but we have previewed at Google I/O this year. In the future, you will be able to attach images to your query using a multimodal model. That's a tongue twister. You can attach that images to your query to provide more information to the model, for example, showing the model an example of what you'd like to do. And we have rebuilt that whole experience of attaching and removing images from your query. So now when you attach something, it appears with a nice animation. The box changes size gradually. A lot of micro interactions, giving some spoilers. But we also have some fun because we learned that we can use springs. And also, we can animate things a lot if we want to. Now, the idea that we had when we started implementing these animations is we want people to feel inspired when they open the chat UI. We want them to feel like something nice is about to happen. And this, I feel like this orchestrated animation gives you the idea, okay, now something is going to happen. I'm going to type something, and something good is going to happen. That's at least the feeling I get when I see things that are cleaned up that way. Let's talk about Markdown Preview. Now, Markdown Preview is a feature that does not currently exist in Android Studio. There are quite a few people asking for it. And we've heard the feedback. We are actually working on it. Yay! Thank you. Now, I want to be very clear. We are working on this with the fine folks at JetBrains, and no, there is no ETA. We are not committing to any date. It is ready when it is ready, but we're working on it, and we are super excited because we also like to see the Markdown Preview, let's be honest. But why are we only doing this now? Why haven't we done this before? Like, we have seen there are a bunch of people +1ing that bug and asking for this feature. That exists in the IntelliJ platform and in IntelliJ community. Why isn't that in Android Studio, you might ask? Well, JSEF is the answer. For those lucky enough not to know what that means, that stands for Java Chromium Embedded Framework. As the name suggests, that is Chromium, which is the foundation upon which Google Chrome is built, shipped as a web view inside of the JVM. Now, that is great because it's a fully featured web view, like as good as the one on Android, but obviously it comes with a cost. It's a maintenance cost because browsers need to be updated all the time because of many reasons, because it has a memory cost, of course, and it has a performance cost. And for various reasons, we have not been able to ship JSEF in Studio so far, so we haven't been able to support the Markdown rendering feature. Because at the core, Markdown rendering is simply taking the Markdown, running it through a transpiler, and outputting HTML and showing that. And we cannot do that. Now, we have some basic Markdown rendering actually already there. So what I was showing before, the timeline of the Gemini chat is actually using Markdown rendering. So we are receiving raw Markdown from the model, from the backend, and as it comes in, we are translating it into native Compose UI and displaying it. Now, there's a reason why it says basic. The actual Markdown preview feature is not there yet. There are still a lot of things that are not implemented that are defined in the Markdown specs. For example, tables right now are not there. Images, we're working on them. Strike through, there's a few things that are simply, we haven't had the time to build yet. But we are on it. And if you've used the Markdown preview in IntelliJ IDEA, you also know that when you scroll the raw Markdown on the left-hand side and you have the preview on the right-hand side, they are somewhat synchronized. Now, that thing is being built by the folks at JetBrains now, and it's very difficult to do, turns out. So, yeah, work is ongoing. We are getting closer every day, but again, we don't have a date. We still have to do the work of actually putting that stuff into your IDE, but we'll get there. If you want to get an idea of how this could look, minus the sync, because, yeah, it's not done yet, you can download the Joule source code and run the standalone demo. There is a Markdown preview/editor page in there that gives you an idea of how that could work when it runs in the IDE. Unsurprisingly, it is very similar to what the experience in IntelliJ IDEA is.
So, Seb, thank you for all the great demos of what we're doing now. But what is the future going forward? So for us in Android Studio, I think we really are striving to be compose first. You've probably heard that term in other ways, but for us, it means something a little different. For us, really, it's about just working on new features in Compose. So, Gemini is roughly a new feature, and there were some other ones coming up. So anything that is new, we will try to do it in Compose first, if possible. But also, we may revisit old UI, like the add device dialog is a really good example. It was an outdated design, so we went back and redesigned the entire thing, but also just did it in Compose. And so we'll slowly get there. But part of why we are confident in this approach is because there's actually really good interop with Swing. So we don't have to rewrite every single thing in the IDE. I mean, the IDE has been around for several years now, many lines of code, and we're not asking our engineers to go rewrite every single feature. We want to do it kind of gradually. And so this actually is a screenshot of the Joule kind of components running in a tool window in Android Studio. Or actually, no, this is IntelliJ, sorry. But you can see the goal of Joule is actually to make it look identical to Swing. So if you actually don't know the difference, that's actually a good thing. That's completely our intention. But the interop is there because we want to slowly do it and not just blow everything up. But what also makes it great, and I think some of you can attest to this, or maybe all of you, Compose is really easy to learn, especially relative to Swing. We have people who've been on the team for a long time. We have a lot of new hires as well. No one actually really likes doing Swing. And for the new hires, they're like, what is Swing? And so when we told them you can use Compose, we actually had seen folks who'd never done UI kind of roll out a feature, learning some basics of Compose maybe within a week, which was very impressive. And so for us, we think, the features we build and iterate on, it can go from like weeks to actually days, which makes, our iteration and hopefully the solutions we build much, much better. And so I guess from the UX perspective, how are we approaching this? Like, are we just going to pretty everything up, or is there actually going to be some intent behind it? So I think for me, there's kind of a couple themes. So one is interactions, or I'd like to say micro interactions. So Compose makes this very easy for us now. So I think you skipped this demo earlier.
It wasn't animating.
Oh, this is a new one.
Yes.
So we can do small things like when you're scrolling, and this sounds silly to say in 2024, but when you're scrolling, we can actually detect that you scrolled past the viewport and have a little scroll to bottom button. Very hard to do in Swing. Another thing is, small areas of delight. So like if you're interacting with buttons, we can kind of animate state in and out. Again, tiny things, but we're very happy we can do this now. The other thing is layout. So Swing does have some decent layout APIs, but we don't really do a good job with what I would say adaptive layout. So everyone works on different machines, different screen sizes, or even when you're using the IDE on your screen, you might resize the window. Tool windows also are a pain to manage because they can only resize so much. So we want to do better with how we actually make the UI respond. This is a simple example. This is a prototype for the new Project Wizard. But the idea is that, as you resize it, we can use lazy vertical grid to actually do this smoothly. And I think for other grids, this will also apply. But we can take it a step further. And so if you can imagine this is a 3-panel layout, like I think the embedded emulator with the new layout inspector. Right now, when you load that up, the inspector is very hard to use in a small space. And so you often have to resize things and relay things out, putting the burden on you to do that. And so what we'd actually like to do is make it more adaptive. So as you resize, we'll just move panels around. And this is not Keynote. This is actually shared element transitions written in Compose. And so we might actually get those in the IDE.
It was easier to do in Compose than in Keynote.
Yes. And so, I think as we look through some of our more complex tool windows like profilers, the layout inspector, and others, I think this is approach will take more so that you don't have to manage the UI, and we can just do it for you. And motion, I think that's been a pretty consistent theme throughout this presentation. So we really want to introduce motion to the IDE. We're probably going to take some inspiration from our folks in material. So these are some very beautiful, expressive material components. These don't make sense in the IDE. These are for mobile. But I think we can actually extract the system in which they've built it. And so there is a system. It's called Material Expressive Motion. And it's all based on Spring and physics-based. And so it's, I think in my mind, pretty simple. You can either do things in what they call the standard way. So it's maybe not so flashy, not so bouncy. And then there's expressive, which is bouncing everywhere. And I think maybe Google will take the lower road. So, and we might too, we'll see. But the idea is that, it kind of breaks down into two areas. You can either do spatial springs or springs on effects. And so with spatial, it's kind of self-explanatory. Anytime there's a transition or something's resizing, when it has to just deal with space, you would use these spring values here. And then for effects, this is more like fading, changing color values, kind of the smaller things. And so you can combine those things to actually make a very expressive UI. So, Seb had shown some of these demos before, but if we break it down, we have like the Gemini timeline, there's a lot going on in there. There's entrance animations. The gradient is actually animating, if you see it subtly, and kind of like a little sparkle almost. And then on here, this is just us having maybe too much fun. This block, if you can expand and collapse it, it kind of just jiggles in the chat. We may keep it, we may not, I don't know.
It looks fun.
Yeah. But, this is kind of like a peek into what we're thinking about doing in the IDE. And then I think the last thing, which is, I think, one of the biggest benefits of Compose for Desktop is cohesion. So making our UIs just look consistent across the IDE, but also for tools that the Android team has built outside of Android Studio. You might all remember the emulator from years ago. So this is our standalone emulator, and I think I have Android 25 running in that emulator. So, this style, this Material 1 style, looked really good years ago, but it hasn't aged super well because now the IDE looks like this, and it looks completely different from Material 1. And so when you kind of bring these two things together and put them side by side, it just looks very out of place. And so for those that don't know, the standalone emulator, like the UI here with the extended controls panel, it is written in Qt. That has made it extremely hard to retheme it to make it consistent with Studio because Android Studio is using Swing. And so just getting the theming systems to come together is a whole nother journey. But we have tried to slowly do this. And so with the emulator embedded in Studio, we at least get a nice toolbar that looks like it's in the IDE. But then when you open the extended controls panel, you see this Frankenstein, which is us trying to manually apply the Studio theme through CSS onto this old UI, which just does not scale, and you can basically throw custom themes out the door. So we think we can do better. Because Compose for Desktop actually supports standalone for Mac, Linux, and Windows, and Joule is the library that can work on these things, we can actually restyle these dialogues and any tool really outside of Android Studio to look consistent with all the Android developer tools. And with that, take us home.
Thank you. We're almost done. Don't worry. Almost time for coffee. For us as well. Before we wrap this up, I think it's very important that we say it one more time. These are early being the keyword, ideas and explorations. We are not making any explicit promises about how or when this will ship. There are no ETAs whatsoever. We are working on these things, and obviously we want to ship them, but life happens. Things can and most likely will change from what you've seen today from there to the point where it ships to you. This is just the beginning of the Studio UX journey. I don't want to call it revolution, but maybe. And we are here just telling you these are the things that we're working on because, again, it's super important for us to build a better tooling system for you folks to be able to do your best. We want to make you more productive, happier, and also we want to benefit the whole ecosystem because, as it turns out, there are a lot of common points between doing desktop UI and doing large screens, for example. And a lot of the work that we are doing will probably indirectly improve things for Compose on large screens as well. And we also get benefits from the work that is being done for Compose on large screens directly on desktop. And we want to use this to raise the quality bar of the user interface in the IDE, which we think is fine, but we can do better than fine, right? We really, really are excited about this. We wouldn't be here otherwise. And we're hoping to have a good outcome for all of this. We're hoping to hear your feedback on the things that we are going to be shipping from now on. And if you want to learn more about the things that the studio team is working on, there is the Android Show Leadership Keynote in this room at 5 p.m. That is going to be very interesting, so stay tuned. And then we are going to be at the Office Hours booth if you have any questions or want to play around with the prototypes that we have, because they were not made in After Effects, they exist. So you can play on them on my computer if you want. And we hope to see you there starting after the keynote. Thank you very much for being here and enjoying droidcon. Oops.
Thank you.